came in for the body in the water off Cove Point. Responded as quick as possible. When we did arrive on scene, it was a female subject face down and appeared to be a lot of trauma to her lower extremities, lower torso.
We had nobody reported missing. So it kind of makes you wonder, if it's just an accident, why wasn't it reported? How did she get out into the bay?
Usually when we get a call like that, it's either from a major boating accident, there's people missing overboard, or it's going to be somebody that's jumped off the bridge and possibly committed suicide. Homicides are very rare.
Crimes in this part of Chesapeake Bay fall under the jurisdiction of Maryland's Natural Resources Police. That puts Detective Dennis Leland in charge of the case and figuring out who the unidentified woman is.
How did she get out into the bay? Now, she wasn't dressed in a bathing suit. You started at the top, and you work your way down. You started eliminating things.
At first glance, according to the autopsy, the woman drowned, making this look like yet another suicide. But the injuries to the unidentified woman suggest otherwise.
There were several large lacerations on her buttocks, on her lower legs, her knees. She'd been run over by a propeller.
It doesn't really mean that there's foul play involved. You're not going to see a body at nighttime. Could she have jumped off the end of a pier and been hit by a couple of boats during the night? Absolutely.
The medical examiner comes to a very different conclusion.
He could determine she was still alive when she was struck.
Based on the angle of the cuts, she was trying to swim away, trying to swim down. You know, your head and your shoulders are heading down, and your buttocks and your legs will be up. Be more susceptible to a prop. And a boat had run over her. You can tell it was 3 times.
This looks like murder, making it Detective Leland's first homicide investigation in his 20-year career.
I need a tremendous amount of help on this, because you had nothing there to really go on.
News of a woman found murdered in the bay shocks everyone in the small community.
They were horrified that it had happened. They were really distressed.
Local publisher and investigative reporter Ken Rossignol jumps on the story.
Reported it immediately. My main focus was I wanted to see that justice was done for this woman.
So far, no one is even able to identify the victim.
I put her fingerprints on NCIC or teletype as a missing person.
He can't find a match. But within hours, Detective Leland gets a call from the nearby Harry Lundeberg School of Seamanship. A student is missing.
The school was an institution to train seafarers, to upgrade to higher jobs, and to gain more skills to make them more marketable in the maritime trades.
They had a student missing that matched the description. I got a copy of her Coast Guard card, which had her thumbprint on it. I was able to match the prints up.
The woman found in the bay is 33-year-old Nancy Manny. Detective Leland calls Nancy's family in Detroit to break the horrible news.
You don't know how you're going to handle it, and you're in shock. You can't believe it's happening. You just walk around like being very numb and wondering why, or should it have been me instead of her, because she was living the life, you know, and what am I doing? Somebody had done something terrible to her. So, and it's like anything in life, you never think it's ever going to happen to you. It's like surreal.
Losing Nancy was tragic and a horrible experience. We were just so close. And there were feelings of anger, wanting to understand why anyone would want to do something to hurt someone like Nancy.
Nancy spent much of the past 10 years at sea, working on cruise ships and cargo vessels.
She had a bright future ahead of her, who was a lively, personable person who was out sailing the 7 seas, and to have her life snuffed out like that, it's a pretty horrible event.
She loved what she did because it took her to travel different parts of the world. And she had a strong sense of wanting to stay close to water.
She enjoyed the work. Yeah, it was hard work. But she always had a smile on her face every single time you saw her in a picture at work.
She had been a pretty tough cookie, which a woman has to be in the maritime trades and to be a seafarer. But she seemed to be pretty feminine anyway, and seemed to hold her own. She had some run-ins with some of the people that she was associated with, but she had been pretty successful in it.
Nancy's been studying at the School of Seamanship to become a chief cook. And by all accounts, she's one of the most popular students.
Everybody I talked to said she was very outgoing, very friendly, good worker. Everybody liked her, and she didn't have an enemy in the world that we could find.
That is, until a meeting with a school official reveals Nancy Manny has an ex-boyfriend with a bad reputation.
He picked up his blotter, reached under and grabbed a photograph. He said, "This is somebody you may want to look at." It was a picture of Billy Mesmer.
Detective Leland then heads to search Nancy's dorm room. He comes across evidence of Billy's dark side.
We found some photographs and some correspondence from Billy Mesmer.
The letter from Mesmer includes a poem called Night Stalker. One line is chilling. No one will ever hear your screams as the predator begins to bite.
It would make you wonder what's going on here.
There's a phrase that just kind of sticks in my mind. Perhaps that he was predicting a future outcome that could happen if she didn't resume her relationship with him. Pretty scary stuff. Mesmer actually worked for me for a while, and I knew him to be kind of a erratic guy, and the conversations he had with me really made me wonder whether or not he had killed her.
Chesapeake Bay. With its many inlets and small coves, it's a boater's paradise.
It's the center of a huge population area of the East Coast, and so people go there to play. The weekend night scene on any time in the summer, even spring and fall for that matter, is one of people coming out to party and have a good time and enjoy themselves.
A hot spot on the bay is Solomon's Island. On the surface, a quaint Maryland fishing village. But in August of 1993, there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Solomon's had a dark side to it that started at about 9 o'clock at night and became a very different town. It was a town of a lot of drug dealing, of date rapes. It had a lot of activities taking place.
None of that is Detective Dennis Leland's responsibility. As an investigator for Maryland's Natural Resources Police, his usual job is looking into boating accidents and safety violations. Now, for the first time in his 20-year career, Leland is in charge of a homicide case. And the odds of solving it are stacked against him.
It takes a day or two for the body to pop up. In that time frame, evidence is lost, things change, environments change. It's not like what you see on TV where CSI come in and dust for prints and get all this information for you. It's not there.
It's virtually impossible even to tell where the victim, Nancy Manny, died.
We had no idea where to even start looking. When people drowned, they sink to the bottom, and the current affects them a little bit as they go down. The body will stay on the bottom until the gases build up and they start to rise. The body will drift approximately 100 feet for every 10 feet of water depth.
That means she could have been killed anywhere within a half mile of where they found her. Witnesses report last seeing Nancy in her dorm room on Saturday morning.
We knew Nancy had a car. I've got copies of the vehicle logs of vehicles on and off the Harry Lundenburg School. And it showed what time she had left. It was Saturday morning around 10:30, and the logs also showed that she never returned.
The prime suspect is Billy Mesmer, the ex-boyfriend who sent Nancy a threatening poem. Where was he on the Saturday she disappeared?
He was somebody I needed to talk to.
Detective Leland tracks Mesmer down at his job on a road maintenance crew.
I told him about Nancy, and he was generally upset when I told him. He said he had come down that weekend. His father did have a boat, but he got in late that night. I believe everybody until I can prove him wrong. And Billy, I had a doubt. I had a doubt about him. There were several hours unaccounted for with Billy Mesmer. He could have done it.
Mesmer's police record doesn't exactly help clear his name.
We knew him to be involved in some criminal activity, narcotics.
Friends tell the detective that after Nancy and Billy broke up, he still wanted to be with her.
Nancy had this natural beauty and this self-confidence that can be so intoxicating. Billy was infatuated with her.
Mesmer is obsessive. He started sending her letters to every port in the world, any place he could think that she was at.
He loved Nancy, but Billy is a very intense person. His emotions are right there for everyone to see at all times.
If you don't want to be with me, that's fine.
According to one of Nancy's friends, after she dumps Mesmer, he threatens to kill her if she doesn't come back.
I didn't think Billy did it, but I didn't rule it out as a possibility either.
Was he capable of murdering Nancy Manning? I thought he was capable of it. I was scared of him.
There's still a big piece of the puzzle missing. Where is Nancy's car?
We couldn't find it. We didn't know where it was.
Where did she go when she left campus?
4 days after we had found the body, we got a report that it was sitting at the tiki bar.
The Tiki Bar is the center of Solomon's party scene. According to the bar staff, Nancy's car has been here since Saturday.
That told us where she had come from. So we started getting information as to who she was last seen with.
Detective Leland learns Nancy came into the popular bar on Saturday afternoon, hoping to bump into some friends. She didn't, but soon made some new ones.
Nancy was a very street-savvy person. So when she would venture out, I wouldn't worry about her because she had a lot of common sense and she was fully capable of taking care of herself.
Nancy was that kind of a free spirit and venturesome. She could fit in anywhere at any time with anybody.
She was very independent, and if there was something that she wanted to do, she would just go out and do it. For her, going out on her own didn't bother her at all.
Toward the end of the afternoon, the crowd thins out, and she's left talking to just one man. No one at the bar remembers who he is. Police put up flyers, hoping to find someone who saw her with the mystery man.
I was hoping to jog somebody's memory and see what we could come up with. To keep talking to people that frequent the bar, people that frequent the area. Did you see anything? Did you hear anything? Figures sooner or later somebody would say something.
Detective Leland.
A day later, a witness comes forward with new information.
Nancy and the subject she was with were seen walking up the end of the pier sometime around 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's all anyone can remember.
Stop it.
7 days after Nancy's death, Detective Leland gets a taste of ex-boyfriend Billy Mesmer's obsession with her.
He went to the tiki bar. He started interviewing bartenders. He tried to involve himself in the investigation. That would tend to make me a little more curious about him. Billy was a good suspect by his obsession with Nancy.
Knowing the spotlight is on him, Mesmer starts pointing a finger at his rival for Nancy's affection.
Billy said that I should look into Tony Sacco.
Billy was a spooky guy. It made me wonder, was he just trying to cast the blame off on Tony Sacco because he himself did do it and wanted to go free?
Is Billy Mesmer sending Detective Leland on a wild goose chase? Or could Tony Sacco be the mystery man seen with Nancy on the pier?
He said Nancy and Tony had been dating, and they had broken up. And according to Billy, it wasn't amiable. It was something that neither one of them wanted to happen, and she was upset.
I'm sick of you following me around.
Billy claims Tony called Nancy a slut in public and bragged to his friends about having sex with her.
Tony had a temper. He also liked to drink, and the two of them together is very volatile.
You're laughing now.
It seems Nancy's drawn to bad boys.
Tony was a big guy, and he was rugged. Came across as someone who was, tough. Could he physically do something like that? Sure.
In spite of the way he treats her, Nancy cares for Tony. This case is turning into a messy love triangle.
Billy was more interested in Nancy, and Nancy seemed probably more interested in Tony. Tony, he liked to use people. Women were just not important.
Tony Sacco is a union vice president at the seamanship school Nancy attended.
I called him the pampered prince of Piney Point. That's exactly what he was. His father was a union president. His uncle was a union vice president.
Sacco has several drunk driving convictions.
The whole time he was in jail, his paychecks continued. He still had his union car.
His connection to Nancy's school may explain something. When Detective Leland searched Nancy's room 4 days after her disappearance, he noticed photographs had been removed from an album. He also found a letter from Mesmer describing a particular photo. It's the one the school official handed over.
He had gotten a picture of Billy Mesmer out in Nancy's room.
It didn't mean much at the time, but it sure does now.
It appeared as though the school was trying to direct me away from Tony and more towards Billy Mesmer, trying to protect Tony. It seemed like they thought maybe he had something to do with it. Somebody had to look at it.
Before Detective Leland can get to him, Tony Sacco leaves town.
It seemed like they were doing everything they could to keep me away from him.
Leland starts asking around about Tony.
A lot of people liked him, a lot of people didn't. And everything kept pointing to Tony, kept coming back to Tony.
Nancy Manny is dead, and her angry ex has disappeared. But there's even more to the story. On Saturday, August 28, 1993, Nancy Manny stops by the Tiki Bar on Solomon's Island, Maryland.
It was a popular place to meet someone, and apparently she met someone that was the last person she would ever meet.
There was a killer out there walking around. It was scary. Yeah, it was scary.
Detective Dennis Leland is convinced the killer is the mysterious man she got on a boat with.
Everything kept coming back to that. Who was she with?
Is it her ex-boyfriend, Billy Mesmer? A more recent ex, Tony Sacco? Or a third unknown man she just met at the Tiki Bar?
You know the answer is just around the corner, but you need that one little piece to help you get over the hump.
What we got here?
Suddenly, that hump gets a whole lot bigger.
We received an anonymous letter stating that the SIU and the Harry Lundenberg School should be looked into. There was a hotbed of corruption and crime and graft.
Insiders claim the SIU, the Seafarers International Union, is running a vast smuggling operation.
There was a lot of activity on board the ships dealing with drugs, and the possibility was that she may have seen some contraband on a ship that she wasn't supposed to see, and somebody got scared and they wanted to silence her.
The letter ends, "We can't sign this because we don't want to end up with Nancy."
Knowing Nancy as I do, if there was anything illegal or immoral, she would say something about it. People who knew Nancy knew that she would not have any problems about revealing anything that was wrong.
If the union had something to do with Nancy's death, it wouldn't be a big surprise to anyone.
Let's put it this way. There weren't too many nuns out there hanging around the Seafarers Union or on the ships. These weren't librarians. These were people who were capable of doing bad things to each other.
The Manny family is sure someone in the Seafarers International Union is involved in Nancy's death.
They had gone through her room before we had gotten there, and some things were missing. Pictures were taken, I don't know, the film out of her camera, things, you know. They were trying to hide something, or she knew something that maybe she wasn't supposed to know.
And now, someone on the inside is leaking classified information to the seafarers. They know they're being watched.
I learned that information in the police file into the Manny murder case was given to the Seafarers Union by someone who gained access to it.
Afraid he is up against a major cover-up operation, Detective Leland contacts the FBI.
Have they heard anything? Did they know anything?
The FBI file on the Seafarers Union is thick. The SIU has a reputation for being violent and corrupt.
A lot of people came to me and said they were afraid to talk. They couldn't talk. And I would meet them clandestinely off campus. They said that the room had been cleaned before I got there. The mattress had been taken. Room had been turned upside down.
Investigative reporter Ken Rosignol learns someone at the school might have been destroying evidence.
They cleaned out all the furniture and bedding materials, everything in her room, and burned it, which would completely remove DNA evidence.
Are they trying to protect the pampered prince of Piney Point, Tony Sacco, or is this something even bigger?
You know who these guys are?
The more Detective Leland digs, the more sinister some union members seem.
Nancy received death threats, and she wasn't the only one. There was another female crew member that had gotten death threats also. There wasn't a whole lot I could do. It happened on a ship, and the ship happened to be in the Pacific Ocean.
She had to keep up with the boys and do her fair share of work. People would get rubbed the wrong way if they're not familiar or comfortable with a female having that role of like me or leave me. But that's just the way she was.
Detective Leland tracks down every lead.
I've talked to numerous enforcement agencies that had looked into smuggling, and it had never come to fruition. We had nothing concrete to support, to back it up.
He can't find even a crumb of evidence linking the school or the union to Nancy's murder. The months spent investigating them is time wasted.
It was back to Billy and to Tony. It all evolved around those two.
After a few more weeks of digging, the detective is able to confirm Billy Mesmer's alibi. He wasn't in town when Nancy was killed.
Billy had access to a boat, but Billy wasn't there in the same time frame. So we're still looking to see who she was with.
I remember Billy being just sad that people would think he would do such a horrible thing to someone he loved so much. And I think it broke him a lot that people he knew, or he thought he knew, would think he was capable of doing such a thing.
Tony Sacco has been living in another state for about a year. When Detective Leland finally catches up with him,
I know exactly where I was.
Sacco says he has an alibi for the Saturday night Nancy was killed.
And who are you with?
Tony had met a young lady, and they had gone out with her. And then they went back to Tony's house, and they stayed there until 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon.
Yes, that's correct.
And after dinner?
The new girlfriend confirms Sacco's story. It's a solid alibi. Detective Leland now focuses on the only suspect left, the mystery man seen leaving the tiki bar with Nancy that Saturday afternoon.
Everything kept coming back to that. Who was she with? Who was this guy at the bar?
And why would she get on a boat with a man she just met?
My thinking about her getting on that boat, if that's how it happened, was because why not? She was not suspicious of people.
Nancy's friendliness could be misconstrued by people, primarily probably from gentlemen. Her being friendly and easy to talk to, but Nancy didn't think about these things. You know, she just wanted to be open and available and free to talk to with everyone that she met.
Detective Leland has one shot left at solving this case. Find the man talking to Nancy at the bar.
Every time I got a tip, I was hoping it would lead to something more. And of course, after you checked it out and you did all the legwork, you're back to square one.
It's over a year since Nancy Manny's murder. Her family gathers for a ceremony to honor her connection to the sea.
She always said that. She died, she wanted to be cremated, and she wanted to be buried in Kauai off Honolulu, yeah. We just did a little ceremony and threw ashes in the water and, you know, some flowers and leis. And we knew Nancy was there. It was beautiful, but it was, you know, it was very sad.
Another year passes with no progress on the case.
It became a cold case because we had run out of leads. We had tracked down everything we could. I wanted to close the case. You want to close everything else. And when it is time to move on, you can say, I did it. I closed it.
People on Solomon's Island question whether the Natural Resources Police are in over their heads.
They're clearly unqualified to investigate it. Their investigators don't have the training, they don't have the experience, and they don't have the knowledge. I call them crab cops with guns.
The only pressure I felt on the case was the pressure I put on myself, because I had been in contact with the family. I explained to them what we had done, where we'd been. I tried to answer any and all questions that they had. You want to be able to give them some closure. You don't want to have an open case.
I pressured the state's attorney and the superintendent of the state police into having the state police take over the investigation.
The state assigns an investigator with a history of cracking murder cases to join the hunt for Nancy's killer. He's Detective Michael White of the Maryland State Police.
By the time the case had gotten to us, Miss Manning's boyfriends had been cleared by the Natural Resources Police. Normally, in a homicide, you look at friends, family, co-workers first, and then you branch out. There was nowhere to branch out for this case. They had exhausted every lead they had when I came on board.
Even the addition of an experienced investigator to the team can't help solve Nancy's murder. A year and a half goes by with no new leads. Then the TV show Unsolved Mysteries does a story about the murder.
Hopefully, the national TV show, somebody would come forward, would remember something. We have a lot of transit activity in the Chesapeake Bay, people traveling from New York south or from Florida north. They may have seen something out in the bay and were hoping for a phone call, hoping for something to come in to keep you going with it.
Nancy, man.
A year after the Nancy Manny story first airs, the detectives finally get that call. It's from a lawyer who says he has a client with a story to tell.
Anytime we get a phone call that gives us information that looks credible, that definitely brightens your day up.
Take your time.
The woman who's come forward is Debbie Watts. She used to live near Solomon's Island, and she provides the first real lead in years.
I was cautious, and I said, okay, what do you know? What were you told?
He was crying.
Debbie says that 10 days ago, she got a call from her brother in Florida. There's something he needs to tell her.
John?
She said, my brother was crying. And he said, I killed this girl up in Maryland.
He told me that he met her that day.
And then
They were-
he said, you know, it was the girl in the TV show.
And then he ran her over with the boat.
And his name was John David O'Meara.
I build a feeling on tips. I try to fight it because I've been wrong before, but I do develop a sense of how important I think this tip is. And this particular tip was very exciting to me. It had a name, had a location, and it had a little bit of background to it supporting the information.
Debbie Watts tells the detectives her brother's wife also has information about the case.
She told us that back prior to her marriage to Mr. O'Meara, he had confessed to her about committing a murder in the waterways of Maryland.
He said they'd never prove anything. He could do the same thing to her.
She was worried for her safety.
So we got a statement from her, and then we went and talked to John, which was an experience.
John O'Meara is in jail in Florida for violating a court order to stay away from his wife. Investigators know his sister's word won't be enough. They need him to confess.
We knew that this interview was very, very important to the case.
Have a seat.
That did make it a little nerve-wracking. He did not seem surprised to see us. Guilty persons expect to see us at some point. I said, I have a lot of questions to ask you. He said, fire away. And I started asking question after question after question. His story was he had never met Nancy Manning. He had never been to the Tiki Bar. He had never been on a boat since 1992. I told him that his boat had received a warning for improper mooring at the Tiki Bar pier. So we knew he was at the pier. And he admitted to being at the pier. We told him that he was observed by witnesses inside the bar and leaving with a young lady about the time Nancy Manning left the bar. He then admitted to being at the bar and leaving with a young lady.
I was on a boat with her.
Finally found the mystery man, finally found this guy that she was on the pier with.
Yeah,
White and Leland are convinced they have the missing piece of the puzzle. But O'Meara is a tough nut to crack.
John said he had some pot and some beer.
Twilight is settling as O'Meara motors into the bay and up along the shore.
Nancy was having a good time by bouncing around on the seats and standing on the seats, and he was driving his boat in between crab pots and hit something, jerked the boat, and Nancy Manning fell over.
I looked for
O'Meara says after Nancy went overboard, he tried desperately to find her, but couldn't see her anywhere.
Said it was dark. He was having problems seeing. So he, instead of shutting the boat down, he rowed back and forth. After about a half hour or so, he started heading back in.
Over the years, I've learned when somebody's telling me the truth and when they're not. As we went along with the interview, I started that feeling that I was totally being lied to.
Detective White uses an age-old trick to force a confession: deception.
He told John, said, our forensics can match this prop to the cuts in Nancy. And that kind of shook him up a little bit.
Once we started the process of showing Mr. O'Mara the marks on Nancy Manning's body in a circular motion indicating a backwards drive of the propeller, he then sat up, took notice of everything on the desk, took notice of the photographs, the notes I was taking, and the circular motions I was marking on the form.
There was no way we could match the prop up to the cuts.
It doesn't matter. O'Mara buys the bluff.
He then admitted to backing up and looking for Nancy Manning and again hitting something he thought may be a crab pot. He backed up and ran over forward, backed up again, ran over forward.
He said over and over and over. That's 3 times.
3 times. The precise number of times Nancy was struck. Only the killer could know that.
The one thing that keeps me from wanting to reach across the table and really give it to him is the fact I know every bit of work that I did and every bit of work that Dennis Leland did will then be gone.
John O'Mara, the prime suspect in Nancy Manning's murder, has given police everything but a full confession.
You ran over her. No.
He still says he didn't run over her deliberately.
When we left the interview, I felt we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got everything we needed. We were excited. We put the ball in motion to get an arrest warrant to hold on to Mr. O'Mara.
Turns out John O'Mara is a bad seed from a good family.
I knew the father of the killer. Fine guy, fine family. All the kids had done fine except for this one. This is the one that got involved in drugs.
John?
And when they start off getting involved with drugs, they usually bottom out.
John O'Mara is charged with first-degree murder. After 2 days of testimony, with evidence against him mounting, O'Mara enters a plea, guilty of second-degree murder.
It takes a very strong person to commit a crime like this and be able to bury it and not think about it at all. The TV show brought it back to him. The more you think about it, the more it's going to work on you and eat at you. And that's what finally brought him to call his sister and tell him.
Hello?
With his plea deal, John O'Mara is sentenced to just 18 years in prison.
I understand and I accept the plea agreement. I was not satisfied, but I accepted it.
I don't think that was fair. But you do got to move on. I hear Nancy saying that. Just keep moving on. It's okay. I'm fine.
Detectives believe O'Mara's account of taking Nancy for a boat ride is accurate, up until the last moments of her life.
8 o'clock, it's starting to get dark. John tried to get friendly with Nancy. She didn't want to have anything to do with him.
I don't think so.
I'll let you on my boat. What are you doing?
Yeah, but,
He tried to have sex with her. He had problems dealing with rejection. And
You don't say what happens on my phone.
with the alcohol and the drugs that he had taken, this is what he did. He pushed her overboard. She's in the middle of Chesapeake Bay. The sheer panic of it would get to you. She was trying to swim away from me.
And he ran her down 3 times, knowing full well what the propeller of a boat motor would do to her. He took the actions of a depraved, brutal killer.
He ran her over 3 times. Once she was cut like that, shock would have set in, and that would cause her to succumb to the drowning a lot quicker. Nobody knows who he is or anything about him. He was free and clear.
Questions were answered, but, you know, it's never what you want to hear. But it was good to know what had happened. I was glad to find out.
Detective Dennis Leland has solved his first murder case.
In my career, this was the crowning moment. After all the years and finally getting this one solved, I think that was it. I could retire in peace and sit back and just relax.
Nancy Manny died at the age of 33. Her dreams of sailing the world cut short.
Even though she's not physically with us, but what she gave us is always going to be with us. On my wedding day, I wore one of her rings, and just to feel that she was going to be with me.
And I live in Hawaii now, and I feel very close to her. I know that she's there with me, and she's, she's still carrying on, helping me out. She just wants us to go out there and, you know, have a good life, make the most of it. She's inspired me. Named my daughter after her and want her to be a strong and confident woman. I love you and I miss you. I can't wait to see you again.